that we've been able to keep up with some of those through virtual platforms. So we have extensively used the platform of Zoom to keep in touch, to have regular face-to-face interactions with them, and motivated each other through the difficult times. We've also started an initiative in the early days of the pandemic as a radio program with our student and school community in general. That was initially organized on a weekly basis. We used to have guest speakers. Some of the students would tune in and we'd have conversations with them. Over Ramadan, we turned that into a daily occasion, pretty much what you guys have been doing here as well. And we've been trying to maintain that spirit of the community, being together, being united in the one cause. And it's been wonderful. I guess, I cannot say I have any regrets over the time through the pandemic. I've actually enjoyed it.
That's a fantastic thing to say. When you realize your passion is about getting into the school community, getting into the young minds and helping them to grow, it's interesting to hear that you have not missed a beat and you've turned your attention to the inner sanctum, to the family, and you've enriched both your family and yourself, which I think is absolutely key, especially during trying times, yeah?
Definitely. I think, these are the times where the true colors come about, and it's been beautiful to be able to, reflect on past times, but also to build on them with the new opportunities. And I think today we'll see many great speakers and presenters that resonate that message and probably, encourage us all further to say, look, any difficulty, any challenge is not one to, stopped by. It's actually one that can give you a grounding to push yourself forward. So I'm very excited to be with you today, George. And I do believe that we have a wonderful program in store for everyone that's tuning in tonight. There are 3 special guests, as you mentioned, and I'm very excited to be speaking to them, as well as a very, very unique musical piece. And, you'll love it. I'm sure that you'll love it, as well as all our speakers. But yes, I'm very excited to be here and to be doing this. Thank you.
And I should add that our musical item is going to be performed by a musician, a special one, someone, Nelson Mandela, the great Nelson Mandela, respected very much and enjoyed listening to. So a real treat coming up on Ramadan Conversations, as well as our first guest. He is Dr. Berhan Ahmed. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the African Australian Multicultural Youth and Employment Services, or AMES as they call it. Dr. Berhan will tell us a bit more about that. He was a refugee at the age of 14 in Sudan, arrived in Australia at 23, again a refugee, but it hasn't held him back. In fact, in 2009, in recognition of the tremendous work he made and has offered to the community, he was named Victorian Australian of the Year. Thank you very much. He's the former co-chair of the expert panel group of the Australian Africa University Network, founder and ex-chair of the African think tank, and currently, I'd like to mention, the adjunct professor at the University of Melbourne in Australia. So he just keeps notching up all these awards. Dr. Berhan, thank you for joining. Welcome to Ramadan Conversations.
Pleasure, George. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's great to join you in this Ramadan conversation. It's sharing such information and such enlightening about all the cultures and all the differences that we have that brings us together as one society, as a color of every nation to one sort of nation that makes a group of diversity with beauty and with flavors. And Africa brings, as you well know, special flavors to Australia, from music to arts to dancing, and more to come in excellence of sport and many others as well. So there is more opportunity in front of us than what we already seen. Thank you.
Ruveyda.
It's great to have you, Berhan. I'm personally pleased to have met you as well. Your story is amazing. It's fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about, being a refugee at the age of 14, coming here, what happened, and how was that journey like?
Well, look, the time I was a refugee, to be honest with you, it was a different world, and I was lucky at the time, even though it is, to be refugee is one of the worst, to go into unknown territories and to adopt to a system that you don't know, neither the culture, nor the language, nor the society. It is absolutely like walking to a jungle. But survival is something that is instinct in biology. So that has pushed me and many young people like me to adapt to an environment at that age with no choice but to force ourselves to be part of society we never knew. And thanks to UNHCR at the time offered me school as a young boy, and I attended refugee school in Sudan, in Kassala. And that has given me the impetus of journey to see the world that there is opportunity. And I took that opportunity and I never gave up to look backward what I lost. If I would have to live in what I lost, I would not stand any time. So that start of my journey has taught me that what I lost was not the issue for me. What is in front of me was the question that I need to step, and that has given me a scholarship to go to Egypt to study university. And I did that university, and I finished that. UNHCR also gave me an opportunity to go to either US, Canada, or what. At the time was the wrong choice to come to Australia. But I chose to come because of my background. I finished agricultural science, and I thought Australia has better agricultural sort of opportunities, and I stepped in to come to Australia. So that was something, I never had a language to speak in Sudan. I never spoke Arabic. But when I landed there, I have a shop. And to buy something when you don't have the language, it is bad. Always, necessity is a mother of invention. And that was the key of my journey that has given me when I went to Sudan, then that has brought a culture into me when I came to Australia to start to first ask, how can I learn this and how can I join the society? I made as my journey coming, I feared to ask a question to people where to start. And I jumped in a tram on my second day of my arrival as a refugee in Melbourne. I was taking the tram and I saw a commanding and taking tickets. And I said, how did you get this job? He told me where he got the job and how he applied. And I just took that and I went to the place and I asked them, I would like to apply. In fact, they were like a lady in the front desk. She said to me, you don't speak English well. How can we have you? I said, don't worry, I know how to speak. I just give me the test and I will do my best. And she gave me the form and I filled the form. And they, how do you like to be conducted? Have you got any experience? I said, yes, I do. Where's your experience? I said, in Sudan, I was working as a conductor. In fact, if they would have at the time Sudan, I would have lost the job. But because I was confident in how I answered the question, they just moved to the next question and they said to me, well, look, if you got a lot of people, but you got a drunken man wanting, he don't want to pay. What do you do? I said, well, that's easy. Leave the one pay, get the 99 people standing to pay, and make more people than wait, lose dollar. They said, that's smart, and they got me into the job. So that job for me was the start of my journey in Australia. I never stopped from that job, going to different jobs until I got to university as a PhD student, and then I worked as a lecturer, and I became a senior and on and on and on, and until now I became the adjunct professor. So my journey of refugee never stopped.
Dr. Berhan, can I just say it's an extraordinary journey that you've been on, and I know very well from my own family's experience just how difficult it was in those very early days, especially for my father, who, like you, had no English or very little English, and even asking for food to buy a sandwich was a very complicated thing to do. And of course, you as a man, especially at that time, you don't want to embarrass yourself, but you do the best you can. And to hear you telling your story about on a tram, finding a way to communicate with the tram collector there, or the conductor, that's a fantastic story. And then going on and getting a job when if they had internet, they would have found and didn't have too many trams or too many conductors. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, let's talk about something else. You've been in community engagement from that time you were a conductor. Can you tell us more, though, about Amy's and the work that it does, a little bit about its history and some of the successes to date, and give us an idea of some of the challenges that still remain for Amy's?
Well, George, thank you very much. That is an important question that I always work on. And well, look, this organization started. I have been working as a chair of African think tank and a founder. I've been advocating and writing in the media and talking on TVs and radios. Talking on the radios and advocating was one journey, but the effect was too little. And then these changes were not reaching the real people that need to change, particularly young people, education, particularly young people graduating university or not able to get to university. This was a challenge that I saw. And then I said, so I need to change the strategy. And the strategy was to work on the ground to understand out to organizations such as schools and deal on the daily crisis. We have been dealing with young boys drop out of schools. We help young boys and girls, refugees in the Flemington Housing Commission, in Sunshine, and many other places. We support homework and many others. But also on the side, one of the initiatives that recently is develop work in the mainstream system. One of the areas that I took was Victoria Police. We have a problem as a community working with Victoria Police. Our kids are becoming failed with, as you know, in this country. Once you record yourself with police, the rest of your life is marked. And some of our boys fail with that. You can name it. There is racism, there is failed boys, and there's many other boys in their journey. So I stepped with Victoria Police and I worked with Victoria Police to change the journey. So I took an initiative with the state government and the police to recruit African Victoria Police. So we developed a special course with Victoria University to fill the gap of what's needed for the job what we have. There's a cultural gap, and I argue with police now. If someone comes from UK today can join Victoria Police tomorrow, but someone of an African or cultural background here, it's hard for him or her to join Victoria Police. So it is not an intellectual rigor, but it is a cultural rigor. So they accept my argument, and now we're in the process of getting over a handful of young Africans, boys and girls, joining Victoria Police. And our recruitment for this year and next year is up to 30 boys and girls to recruit to Victoria. So this is one of the journeys. And there are many other journeys that we've done with Melbourne University as partner, Monash University as partner, to mentor young boys from schools and to help them to work in support of giving them a dream to think big, to look to the future. Because when you don't have network, it's always a challenge. So from the right institutions, so what we did with Melbourne University and Monash now is the sport for grade 8, 9, 10, 11 to be connected with the university in the sports center to give them free membership at the sports center. And this sport for athletics and others for the kids to join, and to bring the academic mentors to the sport club to link with the young boys. Currently, we have a boy who's joined through this process into the art, Melbourne University Art, the Faculty of Art. So the journey looks into diverse. Before this, back in 2007, 8, 9, since the initiation of AIMS to start, we worked with the former finance minister, Lindsay Tanner, to reach out to Australia Post to recruit refugees of African background. With Crown Casinos, we try to create understanding and to give chance for the refugees, and because it was not easy, because no network. So juvenile justice and with the Department of Education, the gap of some African teachers or multicultural teachers coming with qualification in this country to join and help with the different cultures. We need to develop a course, and we are working on it with Victoria University and others to develop the gap to fill with some educational requirements and to help current graduate or the previous teachers that have got a problem to fit into the system. So AIM's role, working in a way, filling the gap. And what generally Africans have that are not getting them into the process of filling into the mainstream employment. So this has been part of the journey, but also we got mentoring processes. We go to what you call one of the prisons now in Deer Park is the Ravenhawk Correction Center. We go there, we celebrate Africa Day, we encourage them, and then when they come to are in process, we help them with employment. We link them to community. We try to divert their journey into continued what you call civism in prison, that they need to move into life. So this has brought a number of young boys to move into a better jobs now, which we've seen some are in a good jobs. We're succeeding with at least in the last year, we had about 9, 8 that have moved from where they were to what they are now doing. So the challenge is, and the challenge we have is now, as before COVID, as you know, was problem without people to get into employment is hard. One of the problems, like last year, I communicated with Herald Sun. As you know, Herald Sun always, they put an article on their and whatever. So the chief of the Herald Sun, and I spoke to him to give opportunity to our new graduate in journalism and to give them a chance to write articles so that their environment understand. It's not the color of the person. It's the person, if you give them the opportunity, they can prosper and thrive in giving them other side of the equation. So with that,
Berhan, if I can interrupt there. Time is going to challenge us a little bit. I just want to take the opportunity. I want to ask one question, and I apologize to Ruveyda. the question is, are attitudes changing? Can you see that we are, the work that you've done, are we changing attitudes? And then I wanted to wrap it up. I want to take it back. I want you to reminisce for us what it must have been like as a young boy growing up in Sudan during a Ramadan. All right. So first question is are we getting some measure of success? Are we changing attitudes?
Without doubt, George, I can tell you from back in the 2000, early 2000, when we have the Nobel Park and the Minister for Emission, we need to kick Africans out. Australia has changed for the better. There's a big altitude change and the big sort of interaction. To be honest with you, I feel very proud being Australian when I see the changes that we are. I get people from mainstream coming forward and saying, Berhan, where can we help? How can we support such young boys? What is needed, or what can we put in terms of mentoring? Can we add our connection? And then within the Victoria Police, I get young policemen coming forward and saying, Berhan, we know there are bad people, but we are not all bad. We're here. And they take young boys and take them to the best, and they to put confidence in their life. So yes, there is a big change. We have come long way.
Good.
As a nation, moving to the better, and we're getting a better every time, better and better to our journey. Going back to my journey as a young refugee, to put my reminiscence of my childhood. Well, what reminds me of my childhood, Ramadan, was always we wait, instead of, wait a light to turn when the time to break fast starts. So we wait for that light from about 4:30 to about 5 o'clock, sitting and waiting when is that light going to turn on. There was no microphones to reach us because there was limited resources. And also the night celebration. Once we had the breaking, the community spirit was live. It just makes you waiting for Ramadan, because that night life becomes a new journey of life. So every child looks Ramadan from that, after the breaking fast, especially in Muslim country, what you see is after breaking fast, night becomes a day. Everyone goes out, socializes, and everyone interacts. If the day changes into night. And that shows the spirit of generosity, the spirit of friendship, camaraderie, help each other, reaching out. And as refugee, one thing I remember in Sudan, you don't ask where to eat. They put it on the street. They come with their fasting break, and they put it on the street. You wait, which one is the best one? You wait the light to come close there, and then you wait and you join those people. So it was the easiest. Generosity was beyond imagination.
Berhan, you've given us some rich images to savor, especially as we now almost end this month of Ramadan. Eid is coming up, of course, on Sunday. We wish you a very joyous last week. And it also reminds me that even though you're a young refugee, you did always manage to find your way to the food. So may it long continue. Thank you, Berhan. Thank you for joining us on Ramadan Conversations. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ruveyda. It's a great pleasure talking to you, boss.
Ruveyda, the good doctor, you could hear the passion. You can get a sense of what a tremendous journey he's had. He's understood the trials and the tribulations, and he gave us a sense of just how difficult a journey it has been for young Sudanese boys especially, and how the community is doing and working behind the scenes to make it a little easier. And we know it's not easy. It never is. And I remember from my early days, and I can remember the journeys and some of the things we used to think about. And I think it would have been the same for you in your younger days, making your way, making your identity in a new culture. Yes?
Definitely, George. I mean, I found that very inspiring, and especially the touch on mentoring and this, network, support network that's there. I think that's an essential for young people to thrive. Otherwise, as Berhan mentioned as well, if you don't have that networking opportunity, there is little you can do to get by yourself. So it's truly amazing what young people can do when you lay the trust and and the support mechanisms in place. So I'm glad that as a young person I had opportunities, and it was inspiring to hear from him that they are giving the African community such opportunities as well. Beautiful.
And you as a teacher are now putting some of that, of what you've been given, a little bit back now to your students, and that's a very special thing too. We're going to continue our Ramadan conversations. Our next guest is someone who wants to talk to us, Ruveyda, about time. She has a quite interesting take on. Yeah. I'm especially looking forward to hearing what her perspective is about these times and what they mean to us, and how we might choose to see this time. Her name is Sumayyah Sadiq, originally from Nigeria. She has, I should warn you, a truly rich CV. Psychotherapist, counselor, life coach, speaker, entrepreneur, poet, award-winning writer, author of several books and various literary works. And I haven't even touched on the fact that she's a wife and a mother, CEO of ComExtra, which is a communication counseling and creativity firm, and managing director of her private counseling practice called Due Counseling. Sumayyah has designed and delivers to this day a self-awareness, a personal and professional development program. It's titled beautifully Aspire. And she does it both in Australia and overseas. And finally, at the bottom of the CV, it says, founder and CEO of FITRA, which is a non-for-profit organisation in the state of Victoria. And she has and continues to work with individuals, with organisations, and serves in many capacities in a number of different community groups. Sumayyah, you're remarkable. Even to survive getting through that CV was a challenge. But thank you for joining us. and Ruveyda's got questions galore for you.
Thank you for having
Welcome.
me. It's really great to be here.
Sumayyah, it's a pleasure to have you here as well. And, listening just to that introduction was quite, awe-inspiring, but we'll definitely get to hear more from you and see that seep through the beautiful advice that you'll share with us. I guess my first question is, with your load of experience and with, those titles to your name, we are going through some challenging times, and at times it's been identified as extraordinary, unprecedented, unique. But what is your approach? I mean, what is that's so striking to you about these times as extraordinary?
Loss. I mean, it's almost counterintuitive to say that loss is extraordinary, but then when we think about it in the context of what we're experiencing at the moment, there's some unity in the experiences of loss that we're having, of course, to different degrees and being experienced in many different ways. But a lot of the losses covers things that we haven't had to negotiate before: loss of normalcy, wealth, health, even mobility, a sense of connectedness, just a whole range of things, our freedom, our connection, a lot of things that we took for granted, that we've always just taken as ease, just now having to rethink because of all the losses. And that's what makes it quite remarkable. And it's not just about something that one group of people are experiencing and another group are just kind of looking on. Worldwide, that's another thing that makes it extraordinary. So I find that particularly interesting, And at the same time, definitely a lot for us to unpack from that.
Sumayyah, with what people are going through, as you touched on, the health issues, the disruption to their daily lives, what are the positive things that we can draw out from this, as we've already seen, difficult period of disruption?
Mm, mm. So the word positive often tends to create this picture of sunny skies and no worries in the world, and you just basically just skipping along on the road, and you don't have anything to worry about. And yet again, there's no way you can talk about positivity without what I put in quotes as negative as well, because without one, the other cannot be. And so that brings us to that idea of the duality of life as we experience it, whereby we have some of these experiences that is taking a lot from us, and yet at the same time is giving us so many opportunities to give us a lot back. And I don't say that lightly, because like I said earlier, people are experiencing all forms of losses, and it can be very difficult to see anything good about the time when you've lost your job, you can't feed your family, and your dignity is at stake. And yet again, it may also be that may be that opportunity to come closer together as a family and find new meanings in being together. So that's the part about it that presents those opportunities, and it's going to be different from person to person.
Definitely. And I guess the overall experience can be shared, but how it impacts the individual is different. However, we often hear that this is a time when we come together. This is a time when we unite in our forces. And we've seen extraordinary, acts of unity in our community, which has been inspiring. What do you think in terms of these times that we're currently going through? What does it require from each of us, from us to each other, in terms of helping one another, contributing to our positive, I guess, progress out of it? How can we truly be in it together?
I think instinctively people are drawing from some of the innate nature of being their brother's keeper, of looking out for one another despite the difficulties that we're experiencing at the moment. So one of the most important things that we can definitely look at is start within yourself, look within, because there's a lot of good in there. The other thing that is very important from all of us is for us to be here now, to be present here now, because what we used to know for the most part is no longer what we now have. And what we're hoping to get, we're not even there yet. So what we do have is here and now, whatever that might mean. The other thing that is very important is learning to sit with the discomfort of just everything that is going on, being able to understand that this is a difficult time for a lot of people, and learning to sit with it, because sitting with it can help us process it a lot better than trying to avoid it or push it away or deny it or pretend that it's not the case. The other thing that is very important to keep in mind is just being able to give ourselves permission to be, being as is. We've heard a lot of people putting a lot of pressure on, oh, come out of this pandemic and you've become the greatest painter or the greatest baker or something. But giving ourselves permission to be as is what is important. Do you at a pace that you can do you. And then one very important thing is just taking comfort in that, in our shared discomfort, that idea that we are all in it together. And again, I don't say this lightly, because I know that everyone is experiencing it to different extent. And so I cannot assume to know what it's like for some families that may not even have had a full meal today, and I've had, definitely plenty to eat. So I'm not saying taking that lightly. And yet again, just knowing that in my reality, there's some discomfort that I'm experiencing, and in yours, George and Ruveyda, there'll be things that you're going through that will also be very related to you. There's some comfort in that I'm not alone. And then finally, and very importantly as well, there's this idea of sharing love. And yes, for some people, it's all airy-fairy, and you're like, oh, what's this about? And yet, one of the most fundamental capacities we have as human beings is the ability to love. And what that brings to mind for me is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him, where he was talking to one of his companions and he would say to him first, I love you. And when you hear someone start a conversation with I love you, you perk up and you're like, I want to hear what you have to say to me. And then the Prophet said to him, I love you. And he said to him, after every prayer, always remember to pray, oh God, help me in remembering you, in being grateful to you, and in worshiping you beautifully. And I feel like that sort of encompasses a lot of the messages that we can give one another. Because when we remember God, it helps us to stay grounded. It helps us to have faith. It helps us to have trust in Him that no matter what happens, He's got our back. No matter how difficult it gets, we can rely on Him. The other part is being grateful helps you to have perspective, helps you to stay humble, and helps you to be generous, to give of yourself. And then the third part, which is worshiping Him beautifully, really does talk about not just our relationship with God, but the relationship we have with one another, our ability to live with integrity and to live on purpose and to live with each other with dignity and respect. So I feel like that can really help us to draw from at these times.
It's a beautiful take on it.
It is a beautiful take, and like your company says and what your program aspire, I love people who have a fight, who have a resilience, and who want to be the best. And not every one of us is driven that way. So I understand the socioeconomic challenges in the communities that are seriously challenged. Our heart goes out. We have friends of ours of this program who are doing as many as 1,000 meals a day, providing for the very many people who are seriously struggling. And I said to him, what is the worst about doing this? He said, the worst thing is that we know only of 1,000 people. There could well be many hundreds of others, but they're too proud, or their culture it challenges them to say, I need help. So is there a message that we can give to all of the community, to those who are struggling, to put aside, if it's possible, not their pride, but because that's a very special thing, but to help them to be a little more resilient at this very difficult time?
Well, I think one of the most important things to really focus on this time is to understand that nobody chose this. Nobody chose this. These are things that are beyond our control. And our ability to see it that way can help us feel a bit more receptive to anything that comes in form of help. And of course, the people that are helping, we always want to make sure that we respect the dignity of the people that we're trying to give and to help. We don't throw things at them. We don't give them leftovers. We don't give them just things because we think that's what they deserve. We give them from the best of what we have. And I think that really helps. And everyone should also understand that we all need help at some point or the other, in some way or the other. And some people's needs might seem like really, really obvious, and some are not, but everyone needs help, every single person. And I think that being able to see it that way can help us to understand, to be compassionate with ourselves, and to get the help we need.
Beautiful.
Well
That's
said.
what a
Ruveyda,
community is.
I was going to say, Ruveyda, isn't it amazing? Sumayyah has not mentioned one thing about cooking or making a wonderful meal for us when we get through this COVID-19 pandemic.
I think
she
just
even
wants
mentioned lasagna. And I haven't even mentioned
wants
lasagna yet.
I think she wants to keep the guest list short, George. If we open it up to the public, look, we've got to get a special treat for ourselves.
I should explain to our audience that doesn't know, a little earlier when we had a test to find out that the audio was working with Sumayyah, she gave us a clue that she loves doing a whole bunch of things behind the scenes. And one of the things that she's done is she's learnt to cook a great many dishes, not only the native dishes of Nigeria and Africa, but she's learnt this Eastern treat called lasagna, and she makes a mean lasagna.
Can't wait.
So
Yes.
we want an invite.
Yes,
We want an invite.
I was sharing with George and Ruveyda a little earlier that I knew a lot of meals before we came to Australia. But one of the things that I got quite excited about was my ability to make lasagna. And from the first one I made that looked like cardboard pieces to some of the mean ones I make now, even if I say so myself, George has twisted my arm for an invitation for dinner. And Ruveyda, you can come along. But I did say that I would include some Nigerian jollof rice as well. So you have to have the both.
It's it.
I mentioned it to my wife, and she's already locked in. So Sumayyah, thank you once again for being not only beautifully spoken and giving us a very special perspective. We trust you have a magnificent final week of Ramadan, and also we wish you every success in business and in all your community work. Once again, thank you for joining us. I hope we do it again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a privilege to have a place to speak and to be heard, and hopefully to give benefit and be benefited as well. So thank you for having me.
That is one very special person, isn't it? Yeah,
Definitely.
She's a great lady. And we're saying this without even tasting. We haven't even tasted the lasagna, and we know it's magnificent.
I can't wait to get that experience.
You've got another treat for us. What's the treat?
George, this one's a special one. So, we promised a beautiful musical piece at the beginning. I said it would be unique. You mentioned that it was Mandela's favorite South African musician. Pops Muhammad will be presenting for us shortly with his instrument. He is normally a multi-instrumentalist. He's a jazz musician as well as a producer, and he's got something amazing lined up for us. So let's get to it.
This instrument is actually called a koran, which comes from Mali, Senegal, Burkina Faso, the Gambia, in some parts of Nigeria, mainly from West African countries. And this instrument has been played for hundreds and hundreds of years. It goes back to almost 500 to 600 years. And it's only in the last 20 to 25 years that we see people from West African countries have been coming out in the world and actually, presenting the instrument to the people. And this is all handmade, as you can see, except for the tuning pegs, which is the same tuning pegs as a guitar. But this harp has got 21 strings, and it's got 2 handles here that you hold, and it's played with only the forefinger and the thumb, the forefinger and the thumb. So basically you only use 4 fingers to play this instrument. It's made from a calabash, a huge pumpkin, if you want to call it that way. And also it's got some nice, beautiful decorations here, to make the instrument look beautiful. And and then it's also covered with skin around it here, just to make it, more presentable or something like that. But it is a very old instrument. The harp that we see in the orchestras today is still very young compared to the koran. So I'd love to play you a little song here, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
How lovely is that?
Amazing what four fingers can do, right?
He's just tremendous. Gorgeous touch, lovely touch. Pops Muhammad, we really, really appreciated that treat. Our final guest is a member of parliament. His name is Peter Halil, and his heritage traces back to Egypt. Not one of the pharaohs, but may well have been. You never know. Currently, he's the federal member for Wills. In fact, he was elected the member in 2016. He's the son of migrant parents, grew up in inner city housing commission flats in Melbourne. He has a background in law, has an interest in foreign policy, multiculturalism, and human rights. I should add he's had extensive experience working in both government and private enterprise, most notably for me as the Executive Director of Corporate Affairs, Strategy and Communications at SBS. These days, he's a non-resident adjunct associate professor at the Centre for International Security Studies at Sydney Uni. And Ruveyda, I should mention, and we shouldn't hold it against him, he's a Collingwood football supporter. Oh. I had the pleasure of catching up with Peter Khalil just a few days ago.
Hi, George. Thanks so much for such a kind introduction. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. I noticed that everything is very much on hold. We're in suspension mode, which means your Collingwood Football Club can't do much of anything other than quite possibly look at one another on Zoom and talk about upcoming tactics and the possibility that they might enter the grand final if it is to be played in 2020.
That's true. And I think all of us are feeling withdrawal symptoms for whatever code, football, AFL, football, soccer, NRL, whatever it might be. It's a big part of our lives that has gone missing amongst many other things, such as spending time with family and friends. So as these restrictions start to ease, I think people are going to be very, very happy and excited to watch sport, to play sport, community sport, to be with family and friends. We are, after all, social animals, social beings. We need that interaction. That's one of the things I think we've missed the most.
You're absolutely 100%, Peter. But can we talk about something that's very close to my heart, and I know it is to yours as well, and it's the subject of multiculturalism. I'm very keen to know what's going to happen to Australia post-COVID-19. What is the country going to look like, especially when you consider that international travel, as we knew it, will take an eternity to return, if ever, to the levels of the past. And I noticed that Christine Keneally was out and about the other day talking about how Labor is looking at trimming the number of migrants seeking to come down under. And of course, I understand the focus will be on Australians finding jobs. So what are we going to look like come post-COVID-19 when it comes to migration?
Well, they're all big questions. And look, I think, to be clear, the op-ed that you referred to talked about a reduction in temporary migration, not necessarily migration. You and I know very well, as passionate advocates of multiculturalism and a multicultural Australia, that the post-World War II model of immigration, where people came here, like your parents, my parents came from Egypt, to settle in this country long term, to become new Australians, that was the central, critical element in our success as a nation, both our cultural and social capital that we've built over generations, and I think critical to our economic prosperity, frankly. That permanent skilled migration, permanent migration, where people came here and made a commitment to this country. Now, I'm an advocate, obviously, we're biased because I was a former multicultural commissioner, worked at SBS, a migrant myself. I'm an advocate for an increase in permanent migration. And that might mean a reduction in temporary migration. And frankly, if there are many people on temporary visa holders who are aspiring to become Australians, then we should be giving them those places. Because frankly, temporary migration is really just there to fill skill shortages, and it's being used, I think, in another way. It's a door into permanent residency, and not just of filling a skill shortages. So if we want to really be serious about increasing our migration, our permanent migration, we should increase the numbers and not allow people to be exploited under the temporary visa holder areas where there is a fair bit of exploitation. And then when people are forced to go home, guess what, George? They take their learnings with them. they take their experience with them and go back home. We want them to Australia. And the last point I'll make, when you say what is Australia going to look like, we must have migration to this country because it's going to be critical for our economic recovery. Everyone knows that, and we cannot allow ourselves to fall into this trap of having this debate, this frankly racist debate about shutting the doors. It's never worked. Every time we've brought people here, the country has improved culturally, socially, economically. So I'm a very strong advocate of that. And that's something that we're going to be debating as a nation over the coming months. And it's an important debate. And 5 points, sorry, you say, what will we look like? Well, guess what? We already are a multicultural nation. And when I talk about Australian jobs for Australians, which I do, I talk about jobs for Greek Australians and Turkish Australians and Lebanese Australians and Chinese and Vietnamese and Indian and Irish Australians, because that's who we are already. You know, the debate is kind of moot because we are already a diverse, a cultureless nation and a successful one at that. And I want to keep it that way, and I want to keep building it in that way.
Peter, Halil, I can hear the passion, I can hear the love and the understanding of a very complicated subject that you and I appreciate very much. I'm a former member of the Immigration Review panel that was set up by Ian McPhee, so I have an inner understanding of the challenges from the government side, also from the public service point of view, and also as the member of the jury or the honest brokers that panel was trying to be at the time. So I understand there are many competing interests, but you touched on something that I need to address too, and you touched on racism. We have seen some unfortunate incidents of racist behaviour. Some people have displayed it in a most ugly way during this pandemic. How do we go about combating it? And have we forgotten the key messaging that's important from federal government level, from state government level, and from local government level?
Well, absolutely. And we've been arguing at Federal Labor for an anti-racism campaign, which is very necessary. Every generation, you start this educational element anew. You know, you don't just spring up mushrooms knowing full well the important lessons that we've learned in previous generations. I think it's a iterative process. And so I think the people that have been attacking Chinese Australians and Asian Australians, blaming them for the coronavirus, I mean, it is stupid, misplaced hatred and anger and racism. These people have nothing to do with coronavirus. I mean, that's ridiculous. But obviously there's an anger that is being, a blind anger that is being expressed and is very much misplaced. And people are right to be angry about the coronavirus. It has turned the world upside down. Don't get me wrong. If anything, they should be channeling their anger at those who are responsible or where the accountability should be. I've argued publicly that the international community should be working together to get to the bottom of how this started, and countries that are involved taking accountability and responsibility. If it's China, if it's other countries, these questions need to be answered. That's where we should be focusing our attention. But that blind hatred and that blind anger, we need to address that. And that is really a disturbing element of the pandemic.
Peter, what do you make of the agents of evil? That's what I call them. They're the shock jocks, the people who have fomented these divisions, not only now, but in the past. I think during the Cronulla riots a number of years ago, I sat there and listened to two key broadcasters. One is about to retire. The other one maybe should have retired a while ago, Ray Hadley and Alan Jones. Let's not hide their names. They have been key and strident fomenters of trouble, and not only dissent and racism, but I'm ashamed to say that they're still being employed, they're still being propped up as key figures that should expound some measure of vision, of understanding for the whole community to take on board. I'm absolutely stunned. I cannot believe that they, to this day, are given such a platform to work on.
Huge responsibility. You talk about the right-wing shock jocks. Huge responsibility and accountability for fomenting divisiveness, division, and particularly against Muslim Australians as well. And in this time of Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan and Ramadan Kareem, وكل سنة وانتم طيبين to all of those listening. I say it in Arabic, I don't know the Turkish, but I say in Arabic, a blessed Eid for everyone. A time of reflection, a time of spirituality, a time of giving to others and sacrifice, and an understanding that we need to treat our fellow human beings, regardless of their background, ethnicity or gender or faith, with compassion and love. That is a key message in Ramadan. And unfortunately, George, you noted that there are many people in our society who do the exact opposite of that, who seek to foment division, either for ratings or for ideological reasons, for short-term political gain. And that has been a very sad chapter in the last couple of decades in our public debate, where these characters have been allowed to actually go ahead and do this in such a stark way. You noted the Cronulla riots and how shocking they were and how they actually exacerbated that and pushed it. Now we're fighting against that kind of ideological and divisiveness that you see from those parts of that political spectrum. And it's an ongoing battle, and it will continue. It has been ever thus, George. Those of us who want to appeal to hope in politics have a much harder job, because it's easy to appeal to fear. It's easy to set up a boogeyman, whether they're a Chinese Australian or a Muslim Australian, because that whips up fear, and you can whip that anger up very, very easily, and the mob can get whipped up very easily. We constantly have to resist that and fight that. It's a harder job that we have, but I think it's all of our responsibility, whether we're in politics or whether you're in broadcasting, play that very critical role, because frankly, we've been successful as a multicultural nation. We've been cohesive because we have been practicing more of what we've been talking about, what you've been talking about, that what we have with each other as human beings, what we share, is much more important than what divides us. What unites us is more important. That's our humanness. And that's something we're going to keep fighting for.
Peter, before I let you go, give us a sense of the seat of wills. What sort of work does your office do or plan to do with the many local multicultural communities that lie within it? What have you been doing during this pandemic to help them, especially with those who are struggling with English and don't necessarily have the same entry to all the information that's about for the rest of us?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because we've actually become much more busier with our constituent work, helping the local community and particularly vulnerable people, and this pandemic has meant so many people are calling our office for assistance, information, helping guide them through the issues. We've done everything, George. We've helped 8-year-olds get their groceries. We've provided in-language services, communications in language with information in Arabic, Italian, Greek, Turkish, and other languages like Hindi and Punjabi and others, because a lot of people, particularly new and emerging migrants and older migrants who still, revert to language, particularly in their retirement, find it difficult to understand what's going on. So and I'll put some ads out on SBS. You wouldn't be surprised. Some radio ads out on SBS in language, in Italian and Greek and Arabic and so on, to inform people about it. And they're coming to our office. We're helping them access Centrelink, helping them with JobKeeper, helping small businesses, helping pensioners, helping students, helping people who are disabled and trying to access NDIS issues. My team and I have been working flat out on that. And that's part of our service to the public. This is a part of the job that I really love, which is helping others. But we have I have a national responsibility as well on policy. That's why I'm working on multicultural policy within the Labor Party. Anthony Albanese put me as chair of the Labor's multicultural course, and we're doing consultations now on Zoom with multicultural communities across the country, in every capital city and regionally, to help to listen to people and understand their issues and what it means to be Australian. What is our identity? You asked about this at the top of this interview. What are we going to look like as a nation? I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, get a sense of where people see us and how they see our future and the evolution of multiculturalism as a concept. And of course, the policies that help people access equity, education, healthcare, all of these issues for those communities, those new and emerging migrant communities, and our parents and grandparents who are aging as well, and how we help them in this period of their lives. So there's a lot of work to do locally, helping people. And I say too, we do a lot of work with refugees and asylum seekers who are the most vulnerable in the community, given they've been left out of any payments and support. And we do that work at the local level and at the national level as well. That's part of my job, and I love doing it because it's about serving others. It's about giving to others and sacrificing for others. And I think, if I can say this, George, in Ramadan, that people are reflecting on how their own spirituality progresses and how they treat others. In this pandemic, we've got all the money towards the economic stimulus that we've passed as a parliament. We've got all of the social distancing edicts and rules. But alongside that, I think what is the key to get us through this is how we treat our fellow human beings, how we work for each other and work with each other. That, somewhat immeasurable, but I think is the most important element. How as a society we will get through this together, as everyone says. We have to work for each other and with each other to get through this. That's something that we're in the middle of. I know you are as well, and many others and during Ramadan, charity is a big part of things, and there's a lot of volunteered their time and effort, not just my staff, but volunteers to help. So thank you for that.
Powerful messages from Peter Halil. Peter, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us, especially during this important time and through the holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Ramadan Mubarak, everyone.
Another passionate man, Ruveyda. That just about wraps up our program. I want to say a very big thank you to you for co-hosting, for agreeing to be there. And wherever you might be watching this episode of Ramadan Conversations, thank you to each and every one of you.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, George, and it's been an absolute pleasure being here. Ladies and gents, the next episode of Ramadan Conversations will actually be tomorrow. It's scheduled for tomorrow, and we'll be flying over the ditch to our southerly neighbours, to New Zealand, and talking to some of our Kiwi cousins. They have some interesting and amazing stories to share. Don't miss it. Be here, and it's the last couple of days to make the most of these opportunities, and hopefully you'll be tuned in. Thank you, George.
Yeah, John, no worries at all. John Cleary and Yasir Demirbas will be speaking to some impressive Kiwis. Well said, Ruveyda. As for this episode, it will be uploaded shortly to the AIS YouTube channel. Should you want to catch up on previous conversations or view this one again, you can find them all on the Affinity YouTube channel. Once again, thank you to everyone, and a blessed Eid to all of you.